D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you live at Bridgestone Arena. We're broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason will be here momentarily. We are back at Bridgestone Arena. The SEC tournament has come and gone. Most of the signage is down, though the SEC Network logo is on the front of our desk here at Barrel House. Might need to change that. But we are back at Bridgestone Arena, as are the Nashville Predators. The Predators open up a homestand tonight against the St. Louis Blues. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6. As always, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The St. Louis Blues 7-2-1 in their past 10 games. They are tied in points with the Vancouver Canucks for the final playoff spot in the Western Conference. This is the first of what, Willie, 3 matchups between the Predators and Blues over the next week to 10 days?
Yes, 3 in 10 days, and the Blues only have 14 games left, and they have made a really impressive charge to get that last playoff spot that's up for grabs in the West. And so you find out a little bit more about your team for next year. It's all about who wants to be along in next year's plan for the Predators. In particular, young players. Spencer Stastny and Luke Evangelista were benched against the Kings on Saturday in the Predators' last game, where they took the Kings. That's the best team they've played in a while, the Kings, and they took the Kings to overtime and lost 1-0. So they've been defending better, but now let's see what they can do against a team that has been scoring a ton of goals. St. Louis lit up the Ducks 7-2 in their last game. The Ducks have a big game against Vancouver on Thursday. So important game going down the stretch for the Predators here. And let's see if they can be the spoiler a little bit for their division rival.
There was some breaking news as it relates to the Nashville Predators this morning. Next season, the Predators will play 2 regular season games in Stockholm against the Pittsburgh Penguins on November 14th and 16th, the 3rd trip abroad for the Nashville Predators. But their first trip to Sweden a couple of years ago, they opened the season in Prague with 2 games against the San Jose Sharks. But the NHL announcing today, Willie, that the Predators will play 2 regular season games in Stockholm next November, or this November, I guess you could say.
Yeah, big
next
news.
Season.
Big news. And I think a lot of details will come out in the coming months on that. But I can tell you that I had an incredible experience going to Bern, Switzerland, and then Prague for the regular season games. That was to open the year a couple of seasons ago. And I'll tell you what, I was fortunate to get the chance to go over there before. I don't know what the plans are for this one, but I'd love to get over to Sweden. I've never done it before. So I've heard great things about what that country is like, and it's a big thrill for Philip Forsberg and the other Swedish guys on the team, and who knows who'll be on that team next year. But I'm pretty sure number 9 will be, and he'll be a featured guy.
So, Willie, you were out in California last week with the Predators. They scored 1 goal in the back-to-back, correct? Against the Ducks.
They did.
And Kings. They were shut out by the Kings. The 10th time this season that the Predators have been shut out. They were shut out a combined 10 times in the previous 2 seasons. The franchise record is 12. So the Predators, double-digit shutout losses this season for the first time in more than 20 years. I want to say it was the 2001-2002 season that the Predators were last shut out at least 10 times. But as they come back home, as you said, with an opportunity to play spoiler against the St. Louis Blues, they also have an interesting opportunity on Saturday against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs have been struggling lately, although they did win last night, 6-2 against the Calgary Flames. So at this point of the season, playing spoiler is a big part of it, but you also want to see the continued maturation of the younger players And where do you think that stands right now as it relates to the younger players in this lineup?
It's a bit of a work in progress. I think one thing that's improved, you mentioned the lack of scoring. That's been a problem all year. They're 31st in the league. They continue to struggle to score. But I do think overall, since the Four Nations face-off, where I think their record is 7-6-1, they have defended better. They still have had some big lapses at key times in games, and that's got to get better. But they are. I thought it was impressive how they matched LA in a tough back-to-back. LA's got the best home record in the entire NHL, and to be even with them, even though it was not the high-event game, I thought that was a good sign that they've maybe taken a step forward with their defensive structure, but they've got to find more offense, of course. As far as the young players, I think it speaks a lot. Evangelista, who is battling an injury, right? He had a pretty significant injury before the Four Nations. I don't think he's 100%, but he's a guy that's trying to push through. He's at a crossroads. I think they've got to sign him to a new contract, and he'll be back in there tonight. So they're trying to push the right buttons with him. You might see him, if practice is any indication, you might see Svechkov, Evangelista, and Zach LaRue, who just got back into the lineup, to at least start the game tonight. And those are guys that they would love to get contributions from to take steps forward. I think Svechkov shows some really good signs long-term. He's still on a big learning curve. And then the other guy that I mentioned is Spencer Stastny. He's another guy that struggled some in the Anaheim game. They gave him the day off on Sunday. They throw him back in there against the team that can really exploit you on the rush. So the Predators have to be in the right place.
I was reminded of this, Willie, as I was scrolling X yesterday, as is my wont. And somebody posted a picture of just you're in your classroom and your teacher wheels in the television. And the caption was, kids these days don't understand how thrilling it was on the first day of the NCAA tournament when your teacher wheeled in the TV, the big, the big fat TV with the big back. Kids these days don't realize how heavy TVs used to be. They weren't all flat screens. And I'm reminded of that as the NCAA tournament kicks off tonight. I know it's not the 64 team portion of the tournament. It's the first four with two games, St. Francis and Alabama State and San Diego State. And I've never been a bigger Aztecs fan in my life than I am tonight as San Diego State takes on North Carolina in the first four. But this time of year is my absolute favorite time of year. I remember going to class and not paying attention in class because I had CBS Sports up on my laptop streaming all the games. There was a time when you could not watch every March Madness game. You had to it was sort of like
you had to go to a sports bar.
You had to go to a sports bar, or it was sort of like the NFL now. If you don't have NFL Sunday ticket, you get the games in your region, and that's what you get.
Yeah, and you had to hope that they would switch to a game that was a blowout. And this used to be a thing. If let's say Channel 5 took the Kentucky game years ago, and let's say Kentucky's a 1 seed playing a 16, and Kentucky's up by 30 points with 10 minutes to go, where you would hope that Channel 5 would switch to a game that was much more competitive, because you're like, I want to watch the other game that's going on. But as soon as they would do that, 1 million Kentucky fans would then call Channel 5 and say, get the Kentucky game back on. What are you guys doing? It used to drive the late Mark Howard crazy, because he might have been the guy making the call, right? Say, let's go to a better game. But now you don't have to worry about that anymore.
I distinctly remember back in 2001, so I would have been 11 going on 12, and Duke was playing in the first round of the tournament against Monmouth in a 1-16 matchup. And I would love to go back and look at the box score, but what I remember is Duke jumped out to a 9-0 lead within the first 2 minutes of the game. Monmouth didn't even make it.
Monmouth.
Monmouth?
Yeah.
Monmouth.
That's not mound. It's not a mound. It's not a pitcher's
Sorry.
mound.
Monmouth.
The Hawks.
Yes.
I think he's still the coach. King Rice, who played at your favorite place, North Carolina, and then was an assistant at Vanderbilt. Another assistant that I played under, Rick Callahan, is on his staff. So I do know a little bit about the Monmouth Hawks.
So Monmouth did not get to the under 16 timeout before having to take a timeout. I want to say
Right.
it was like 9-0 Duke. They go to commercial, and Greg Gumbel is in the studio and says, well, we're going to take you to another game now. So I remember the first game of that tournament run for Duke, I watched 2 minutes of the game because then they switched to another game
Right.
that was far more competitive. Now that's not an issue because every game is at your fingertips.
Right. And so it's probably not a good thing for sports bars, even though I still think there's nothing like watching at a sports bar with a lot of people when there's multiple games on. It's like a national holiday. I think it's great on Thursday and Friday. They actually also stagger the games a little bit more than they used to. But the first couple days, I love when there's 2 or 3 games going on at once. It is a lot of fun to follow them all. So I'm looking forward to that. But the first 4 tonight, there's going to be a lot of people watching North Carolina. And there were some people that really did not hold back at all on the conspiracy theory. They're all in. If yesterday was flooded, you thought your rant was something, Adam. I mean, people are going no holes barred on the incentive thing of Cunningham, where their TV dictates, North Carolina will get higher ratings than a Boise State or somebody like that, or a West Virginia. And so, there's an interest in TV to have a higher profile program in that first 4. Like, there was all kinds of conspiracy theories going on. I'm sure D-Mace loved to hear about that. He loves a good conspiracy. So North Carolina is on. If they get slaughtered tonight, that's only going to fuel the governor of West Virginia, who continues. How is the launch of the investigation?
The investigation has been launched.
It's been launched,
I believe.
Okay.
The launching has happened. Who knows how far it will go? But by the way, I want to tell everybody that you can come play hooky with 102.5 and 106.3 the game this week. This Thursday and Friday. We will be at Boomba's Pizza and Watch Bar from 9 to 6. On Thursday, we will be at the Boomba's in Murfreesboro. And on Friday, we will be at the Boomba's in Spring Hill. So that's Thursday and Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Come enjoy award-winning pizza, handcrafted beverages, win prizes, and watch the games with us as the tournament gets underway in full force. Derek Mason is here. We are just experiencing some technical difficulties with the headset. Fortunately,
we've called
for us,
in the chief. We've called in the
suit is here. Chase McCabe. He is still working on it. So we endeavor to fix that. So
we are
that
troubleshooting,
yes.
as we like to say in the business.
It's not like when we were younger or when I was younger and you had to blow on the game cartridges to make them work.
I've tried that move.
I had Super Nintendo, and if it didn't work, you just go. There's no scientific data to support that actually works, but
I feel like it did work.
It did work a lot.
Anecdotally, yeah.
It did work a lot. So Derek Mason is here. We just endeavor to get him on air. We'll blame the SEC for this. The SEC was here.
There's no question.
Yes.
It is Greg Sankey's fault.
It just means more to break everybody else's equipment.
Oh, wait. We have a breakthrough.
We've got a slight tap.
I hear taps.
Let's see.
Check it in.
Hello?
No. I hear echoes.
I can hear something, but
it's not coming through.
Yeah.
It's coming through our mics, not yours. So D-Mace is he's here. That's proof that you're here. You're just not coming through very loud.
Greg Sankey, we will be sending you the bill.
Yes.
For our
sabotage.
Yes. For
we got it.
You got it?
Yay.
Yes. D-Mace is active.
Okay, now
He's activated.
Okay, now turn it down a little bit. He's 51 years of listening.
Thank you, everybody.
There we go.
As we troubleshoot. Yes. All right. Thank you, Chase.
Yeah, that's what you get paid the big bucks for.
The suit is the man. Took him 2 minutes.
All at 2 minutes.
If that were me trying to do that, I would have knocked the whole station off the air. So we're glad that
we'd have
didn't
gone
happen.
from 1 mic not working to 3 mics not working. And for me, I would have just unplugged the whole thing and it would have been gone.
I don't think there's anything that I can blow on to make that work. unlike my Super Nintendo cartridges. So yes, we will be out at Boomba's on Thursday and Friday. The Murfreesboro location on Thursday, the Spring Hill location on Friday. So come play hooky with us, watch some basketball, eat some delicious food, some delicious pizza, and I will try not to be distracted. I'm telling you guys. So remember, last week we were all in different locations at one point. Willie was in California with the Predators. Derek was battling the flu, so he was at home. I was at the time, Assembly Food Hall, watching the Duke game when Cooper Flagg went down with his sprained ankle. And I'm telling you guys, I had a difficult time getting through those segments. I was physically ill. So hopefully we will have more fun watching the games on Thursday and Friday. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, Devin McLaughlin, Vanderbilt forward, will join us today at 12:30. Vanderbilt taking on St. Mary's in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That game scheduled for Friday, a roughly 2:15 Central tip-off against St. Mary. So Devin McLaughlin, Vanderbilt forward, will join us at 12:30. Looking forward to that conversation.
Devin McLaughlin is a former walk-on at Boston College, played a couple years there, jumped into the portal, and like about 10 guys jumped in with Vanderbilt and Mark Byington and has carved out a great role. He's had some big, big plays during the course of the year. He's a very important player for them. Can hit the standstill three, battles as an undersized guy who often is guarding a guy 6'10", 6'11". And St. Mary's has got size. There's no question about it. So he will be a very important guy for Vanderbilt in their first game against St. Mary's. I'm looking forward to just talking to him about what this has been like, just meshing with all these new guys, accomplishing this, and now looking forward to a challenge, playing somebody outside the SEC. Like, I'm sure all these teams are like, man, I can't wait to play somebody who's not in our league.
Yeah, it's going to be good for Vandy. It's going to be interesting to see which team they allow play and
How the game's going to be officiated.
Exactly,
that's huge.
Absolutely, because if the game if they're allowed to play with a level of physicality that we saw them play with during the SEC,
and I think the whole league is like that.
Yeah.
There's no question.
So if they're allowed to go in and play physical basketball, then I think Vanderbilt has an opportunity to advance. And I think they could end up shocking people. But that's the central question with the SEC. With every team, will the tournament allow them to play that physical brand of basketball that they played all during the season? If you listen to, if you read some articles, and I read Rex Rhodes' article about the SEC,
and we will get deep into the SEC later in terms of what the conference has to accomplish in this tournament to back up its greatest conference ever talk.
Exactly. So, but the part that I zeroed in on is the physicality part that was brought up. Wearing each other down. Will that ultimately be a negative for the SEC moving into the tournament? So, listen, if they allow Vandy to play the physical brand of basketball that they've been playing all year, then I can see them really going far in this tournament. I can see them shocking a few teams here and there. But if not, then guys like McLaughlin and Carey, those guys got to do a tremendous job, especially in the first half, at staying on the floor.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the upcoming the NCAA tournament. The SEC tournament is over. That's why we're here. The NCAA tournament, which kicks off tonight, although the main tournament starts on Thursday. And once again, we will let you know that we will be at Boombah's on Thursday and Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. The Murfreesboro location of Boombah's on Thursday, the Spring Hill location on Friday. So come join us, watch some basketball, have some delicious food. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck will join us as we dive into the NFL draft and more. Preds fans, don't miss Smashville Live tomorrow night at Brewhouse South in Franklin at 6 p.m. See your Predator star players up close and personal, and also get autographs and pictures. Tomorrow night's guest will be Jonathan Marchessault. That's Jonathan Marchessault tomorrow night at Brewhouse South in Franklin.
Check. No question about it. Loan Pronto has got you ready to go when it comes to your home and using your home's equity to your advantage. The average homeowner has over $300,000 in home equity, and you can use that to your advantage. You got bills to pay, you got a tuition payment due, a car loan that you want to get paid off, a credit card that's been eating up your budget month in and month out. Don't let that stop you from using the assets that you have in your home's equity. And Loan Pronto has the best engine to use it. They can get you that cash in just a matter of days. And it's a big advantage to work with Loan Pronto because I've worked with them firsthand. They'll help you through the process. There's not as nearly as much paperwork as there used to be. In fact, none. No cumbersome process, no junk fees, often no appraisal, and you can be approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull to get that process going. So call Loan Pronto at 615-499-5780 or go to loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Get that money you need. Loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLS consumeraccess.org.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our very good friend, Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. Tim, this morning I was checking over Mel Kiper's latest mock draft on ESPN.com, and I was seeing a lot of the familiar names in the top 10. He has Cam Ward going to the Titans, Abdul Carter going to the Browns, Shedeur Sanders going to the Giants. I get down to number 9, and I'm stopped in my tracks. Mel Kiper has Jackson Dart, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, going 9th overall to the New Orleans Saints. That caught me by surprise. I know that Jackson Dart turned a lot of heads at the NFL Combine, but what do you make of Jackson Dart apparently skyrocketing up draft boards?
I'm actually not surprised by it. I think he has a lot of traits that you would want in a quarterback that goes in the first round. I think there have been, like, if you were to just test physically, you say, okay, height, weight, strength, mobility, arm strength. If you were to do that in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, like, Jackson Dart probably wins every category. And so, I think you look at that, you look at the fact that he played a lot of football in college. That's something I've talked about a lot. Like, just, for some perspective, like Cam Ward, if you include Incarnate Word and the other stops, like, he's going to, leave college with like over 2,300 pass attempts. And Jackson Dart, in similar fashion, not nearly as much as Cam Ward, but he's played a lot of football. And so, kind of like Bo Nix, where, here's a guy who like has first rounder traits, right? Size, strength, athleticism, like the what you kind of expect out of a first round quarterback. I think Jackson Dart possesses a lot of those, and so it doesn't really surprise me.
A lot of new quarterbacks in new places, Tim. Sam Darnold in Seattle, Geno Smith in Las Vegas, Justin Fields with the New York Jets, Daniel Jones lands in Indianapolis. Which quarterback landed in the best situation for him?
Well, I would probably pick two guys specifically. I don't know that I thought Daniel Jones was still a starter, would have an opportunity to be a starter. So the fact that he goes to a place, and then when you see his contract, to say, look, he's going to end up as he most likely will end up as the starter in Indy, that's pretty good living right there. And I would say a similar thing for Justin Fields. Justin Fields' contract is not backup money, which is really what he was last year. I mean, he basically gets beat out by Russell Wilson. And he signs way better than backup money and goes to a place that, look, if they don't draft a quarterback, he's going to find himself, in a situation where he's the guy. So I think anytime there's somebody that is fighting for their future as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, and then they find themselves as the presumed starter, at least at some point during the year, as they enter into training camp, that's a big time win for those guys.
Now, Tim, you did mention Daniel Jones as one of those guys that may have ended up in a perfect situation. If indeed Daniel Jones beats out Richardson, what then does happen? What happens then to Richardson? Do you think it will be another Darnold and J.J. McCarthy sort of situation when he's up to speed, when we feel he's ready, we're going to throw him back in there? Or could it be a situation where Daniel Jones ends up playing well enough to sign a longer-term contract there?
Yeah, and I don't know that it's as much about Daniel Jones, because I'm not convinced that he'll play well or he'll stay healthy, right? I mean, just look at his track record of, just inability to, play the entire season and be healthy and then continue to, really be a consistent passer throughout the entire season. He hasn't been able to do those things. So I do think like what happens to Jones and then what happens to Richardson, I think are going to exist like in totally separate scenarios, right? So, and the reason I say that is Daniel Jones could fail, and Anthony Richardson could still end up like Trey Lance, right? It doesn't mean, or Jones could have success, and I think that's probably the most similar path, for Richardson in terms of Trey Lance. I say that because of this. I referenced Cam Ward and pass attempts, coming out of college. Do you realize that Anthony Richardson left college with 348 pass attempts? Like,
Wow,
ever.
that's one season.
And so
It's
now
not a
think
lot.
about this.
Yeah.
So now he's played in the NFL for a couple of years, but because of injuries and whatever, like he, like that. Excuse me. That's his NFL pass attempts, right? And then you go to college, and like it's the same thing. Like he didn't. It's fewer than that. So like when I say that, like you can't get better. You can't be good if you don't get the reps doing it at the toughest position in sports. So like I just, that to me is like there's a time on task element. So I say all that, D Mason, just to say that like if he's splitting time with Daniel Jones, then he's not playing. And like you're not going to get better if you haven't been doing it. And he hasn't been. And that was kind of always my issue on the Trey Lance front, and I think it applies in a very big way to Anthony Richardson.
Now, Tim, do you think someone's going to convince themselves? Because, like Adam said, Jackson Dart it seems to be moving up the charts, and we see this each and every year, especially when there may not be a consensus 1, 2, 3. Then all of a sudden, there's only one guy. Then all of a sudden, there's 2 or 3 guys, and then it ends up being, team possibly forcing themselves into drafting a guy that they probably any other draft year they wouldn't draft him. But do you think as this process continues to go that Jackson Dart or anyone else outside of the 2 guys that we've talked about, do you think they will start entering the picture more and more and realistically get drafted in that top 15?
I think Jackson Dart likely will. I don't know that anybody else makes it into the top 15. I do think that there's a chance that somebody just absolutely loves Tyler Shough from Louisville. I would just say this in terms of, people talking themselves into something. And let me, hopefully this isn't long-winded, but let me preface this by this. When I look at a quarterback, I believe quarterback evaluation, right? So like Tom Brady is never going to go down as having the best arm strength ever. Neither is Peyton Manning. Neither is Drew Brees. And you can run down the list of guys, like, look, Steve McNair had a strong arm, but it wasn't like, that wasn't the trait that you just had to follow everywhere you went to be like, yep, that's the reason he's going to be good. Like there was other things about his game that made him great. And I think that, and so I tend to, when I evaluate quarterbacks, I think, not weigh just like the physical attributes as much as some other people do, right? So, look, I'm going to I liked Kirk Cousins coming out more than, some other people did. And because I wasn't bothered by what people thought his physical skills were. So I say all that is I tend that direction. Okay. Now, I also think that there's a difference between Matthew Stafford and somebody that doesn't have those physical attributes, right? The ability to do those things. And so I do think it matters, but I think if you lead with that, you can get yourself into trouble. So I'm going to bring this to Shedeur Sanders. I think that he's a really good quarterback. I think he's been coached well to play the position. I think he knows how to play the position. I think he has things about him that translate to success long-term at the position in the NFL. Okay. And I'm going to say this, and I hope that people are going to hear it initially as an insult, and let me explain it. I think his upside is Andy Dalton. That's what I think Shedeur Sanders is because of what he is physically. Now, listen, Andy Dalton's thrown over 250 touchdown passes in the NFL. Like, he's been a wild success. But no one ever thought Andy Dalton was a top 5 pick. So, like, I don't know if I'm making that distinction clear enough. Like, that to me is the difference. It's no different than when Teddy Bridgewater came out and people thought I was being critical of Teddy Bridgewater when I said, look, I think his ceiling is Alex Smith. And, like, Teddy Bridgewater didn't have Alex Smith's career. You know, and so I think when we're talking about that top 15, and I said the same thing to you guys about Mac Jones when he came out, like, when the guy has athletic deficiencies, when you are going to play a sport that's got some of the most, you know, freakish athletes on the planet playing it, I do think if you're going to be talking about the rarefied air of the first 15 picks, I do think it matters. And so it's a long way for me to say, like, I do think people are going to feel like they've got a forced hand on Shedeur Sanders.
It's a great point, and it leads me right into the question I wanted to ask you. And you've put the pathway out there. Tim Hasselbeck is with us. So I saw a study done. I think it was out of Cleveland. Tony Grossi, I think, has done a lot of research here. Last 5 years, there's only 2 quarterbacks starting that were drafted outside the first round. I think Brock Purdy is one, and obviously Jalen Hurts is the other. There's other guys who were drafted in the second round, but it was previous to the last 5 drafts, like Geno Smith. He doesn't count in that. So it is hard to find your quarterback outside the first round. I think it was his point.
Mm-hmm.
So, but all of those things you said about Sanders and some of these other guys. So, to me, if you're the Titans, is Cam Ward worth the first pick in the draft? It's different than saying Cam Ward is a first-round pick and take him with the first pick. So, is he that much of a physical upside to warrant that kind of pick?
So here's what I would say about that. And so I hope this doesn't sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth on it. If you believe that somebody is a 10-year starter, right, a decade-long starter, and will play at a starter level or a high level for that stretch, I think it's okay to draft that guy anywhere. You know,
okay.
So you see what I'm so like. So when I say that,
even if he's like, Andy Dalton,
revisionist history. Yeah, look, I mean, I don't have it in front of me of like who the Bengals picked in the first round, you know, while Andy Dalton was around there. But like, I would bet you that he meant more to the franchise than any of those other guys, right?
Right.
Like
they were a laughing stock for a long time.
Yeah,
and Andy Dalton gave them some really good years.
Stabilized them, took them to the playoffs 4 times, like all the stuff. So like, you know. So I say that to say when Matt Ryan was coming out, I mean, it was like, oh, you can't, got through 19 interceptions at Boston Colleges last year, doesn't have elite arm strength. So Miami Dolphins, nope, can't do it. Look, so they drafted Jake Long. Look, they got Jake Long right. They drafted a really good player. But like, wouldn't they have been better off by drafting the quarterback? They would have, because they would have stabilized the most important position. So, you know, so what I'm saying is like, if a guy can be a decade-long starter, then it is okay to take him anywhere. But like, it just always kind of bothers me when we do these draft, you know, comparisons. You know, everybody is, you know, every left tackle, like the comparison is Jonathan Ogden. It's like, no. Like, who's the Mike Roos? Right? Like, because like, it's going to be that guy too. Like, and that's okay. That's a first rounder. That's a decade-long starter. Like, I just think sometimes our comparisons are wrong. And I also think the expectations are wrong. So if you knew that you were drafting Andy Dalton, and that's why I'm saying it, for a lot of people initially, it'll sound like an insult. But if you knew you were drafting Andy Dalton, you got the pick right.
But there's extra pressure on the first pick, don't you think, from the fans?
Yeah, there is. And so here's what I would say about Cam Ward. Cam Ward, he has like elite traits. Like, his ability to throw the football is different than Shedeur's, different than Andy Dalton's when he came out. And I think when you look at the pass, okay, and I've referenced this before, And so it's like the evidence of proof of like, what can the guy do? You're not evaluating 393 attempts. You literally have the ability to evaluate 2,400 attempts on Cam Ward. So like there should be way less mystery on Cam Ward than there is when you're drafting Mark Sanchez with 17 starts in college, or, you know, Anthony Richardson's few starts, or Trey Lance's situation. Look, and I think that's one of the reasons why, like, you know, people miss when they looked at, or I'll give you another example of a guy who played a lot of football. Go look at Bo Nix. You know, so like there's so much to evaluate and say, wait a second, and he has these physical traits, and he has that time on task. Yeah, this is worth it. So, yeah, like I do think Cam Ward has the traits to make it worth it.
Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us here on D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Tim, a pleasure as always. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good. See you, fellas.
615-737-1025. Some really interesting stuff there.
That's interesting stuff. Big time.
We will react to what Tim had to say, and you can react as well at 615-737-1025. This week's Nashville's Best Deal is from Streetcar Taps and Garden. Patio season is here. Enjoy great food, cold drinks, and fresh air on Streetcar Taps and Garden's covered patio. Get half off a $30 gift card now before they are gone at thegamenashville.com/deals.
All right, let's talk Lead Company, proud sponsor of our Nashville Predators coverage. The team is back home. 3-game homestand starting tonight against the St. Louis Blues. Our coverage will start at 6, brought to you by Lead Company. Chase McCabe will be running the show tonight at the top of the 6 o'clock hour. Blues are playing really well. They're right on the bubble. Nashville plays them 3 times before the end of the regular season, and so they can play spoiler here. And we'll see what kind of steps forward the young players can take after the Predators went 1-1-1 on their California road trip. Lead Company, meanwhile, is checking everybody's air conditioners. Hey, we are at the Donick House, proud members of the home maintenance plan. We subscribe to that. A small monthly fee, free checkups every year on our air conditioning, plumbing, heating, and cooling. So we've got all of that going on at our house. We feel good about it. We've got a new furnace and air conditioning system we put in the fall because ours had reached the end of the line. And Lead Company was able to get us a good deal on that and take a look at it and say, it's time to get the new one. They can do all of these things for you. If you're a homeowner, these days are going to be there, whether it's now, next year, or the year after. So stay on top of it. Lead Company can help you make those big decisions at your house. 615-567-1000 or leadcompany.com. That's 615-567-1000 or leadcompany.com. Lead Company since 1944. is Cam Ward worth the first pick in the draft? It's different than saying Cam Ward is a first-round pick and take him with the first pick. So is he that much of a physical upside to warrant that kind of pick?
So here's what I would say about that. And so I hope this doesn't sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth on it. If you believe that somebody is a 10-year starter, right, a decade-long starter, and will play at a starter level or a high level for that stretch, I think it's okay to draft that guy anywhere.
Okay.
So you see, so when I say that,
Even if he's like, Andy Dalton,
revisionist history. Yeah, look. I mean, I don't have it in front of me of like who the Bengals picked in the first round, while Andy Dalton was around there. But like, I would bet you that he meant more to the franchise than any of those other guys.
That was Tim Hasselbeck just now on our program. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you live at Bridgestone Arena. Predators versus Blues tonight at 7 o'clock. Some really interesting stuff there, gentlemen, from Tim Hasselbeck, because I've seen a plenty of this with it looking like the Titans are going to draft Cam Ward. It seems like all of the signs are pointing in that direction. But I'm seeing a lot of Cam Ward is 15th on this big board. So why would the Titans draft the 15th best player with the number 1 overall pick? But drafting is an inexact science, as we know. And he compared Shedeur Sanders' ceiling to Andy Dalton, right? When you hear that.
Well, yes, Sanders, yes.
Yes, Shedeur Sanders. When you hear that, you're thinking, Andy Dalton? Why would I want to take Mel Kiper's latest mock draft has Shedeur Sanders going 3rd to the Giants? If you're a Giants fan and you were listening to that, you hear Andy Dalton and you think to yourself, why would I want to draft Andy Dalton with the 3rd pick in the NFL draft? Andy Dalton, by the way, was I believe, an early 2nd round pick.
He was the 35th pick overall
in the
second
NFL
round
draft.
Yep.
So it really is interesting because we talked about this last week. If the Titans think that Cam Ward is that franchise quarterback, it doesn't matter what any of us say or what Mel Kiper says or Matt Miller or Daniel Jeremiah or Field Yates. It doesn't matter what any of them say if the Titans feel that way. But this is, I think, an interesting subject right now because Cam Ward is not considered that sort of can't miss quarterback prospect like Jaden Daniels was, or Caleb Williams was, or Joe Burrow was. And I think people, Derek and Willie, have it in their mind that if you're going to take someone with the number 1 pick, they better be on that level.
I don't think people realize how hard it is to get that guy. Because they look at, what Washington was able to do with their pick, what it seems like Chicago's able to do with their picking Caleb Williams, how it looks as if Caleb Williams is going to be that guy. You look at Patrick Mahomes later in the first round at 12. So when you start to look at quarterbacks, in your view is Patrick Mahomes, Jaden Daniels. Let's just go to the young quarterbacks and start with Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. When your view is just those guys, you're going to get a little tainted. And you're going to say, well, why can't we get one of those guys? Well, one of those guys don't come every draft. That's why we're having the long discussion about the guys that are in this draft, because no one feels as if they're those guys.
Right. We bring up the word generational, right?
Yeah,
we've banned that from this show.
Guys, yes.
But for the purpose of this argument, the reason why prospects are considered generational is because, by definition, they come around once in a generation. There are not generational players in every draft. Now, do the Titans wish, perhaps, that they would have been in this position a year ago when they could have taken Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or Drake May? Sure. I'm sure Titans fans feel the same way. But Willie, I thought Tim made some really interesting points just about the evaluation of quarterbacks and this idea. We talked about this as well. We read these mock drafts and we see this player is comparable to this player, and I feel oftentimes when it's an elite player that those are incredibly lofty expectations that are not normally met.
Seattle and Philadelphia showed you can do it without a number one pick in the draft. They showed it. Philly showed it twice. Seattle showed it once with Russell Wilson. So there are other ways or other avenues to a championship. And if I told you that, okay, you're going to draft this guy at number one, and basically he's going to average 26 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, but he's going to throw for about 38 to 4,000 yards per season and complete about 62% of his passes. What would you take that as a quarterback anywhere? I think you would take that.
I think
as a fan base, because that's winning football, and that's what Andy Dalton was to Cincinnati.
That's the problem, though. When you're the first pick, there are probably unrealistic expectations. Even if you look through history at the first picks in the draft, they don't all turn out to be Joe Burrow or Peyton Manning.
More bust than anything.
Yes,
when it comes to that position,
no question. So at the same time, I think Tim's point is, if you get a 10-year starter that is steady, like Andy Dalton or Alex Smith, that's a good pick. That's good use of the pick. Now, I'm still not one that is sitting there going, they're going to take Cam Ward. I'm not there. I still think there are options there. And I think you continue to shop. I don't think you should make up your mind right now. You continue to work it. If you do think he's the guy, then eventually, I'm not saying they won't take him, but I'm not saying it's a given. But I think it's a great question of how you would feel if he ends up being something in the ballpark of Alex Smith or Cam Ward and not the quote-unquote franchise quarterback. Because people think, you got to have a franchise player with the first pick.
615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on that. Some really interesting comments there by Tim Hasselbeck. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, the NCAA tournament. It starts tonight. The main event starts on Thursday. Wall-to-wall basketball on Thursday and Friday. Two of my favorite sporting days of the year. The SEC, it's talked a big game this regular season, deservedly so. What must the SEC accomplish in the NCAA tournament to live up to the best conference ever talk? We will get into that next. 615-737-1025. D-Mace, Vengen, and Donick, by the way, is presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vengen, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you live at Bridgestone Arena. Predators and Blues tonight at 7 o'clock. Pregame at 6. Right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The Predators open a 3-game homestand tonight against the Blues, Thursday against the Ducks, Saturday hockey night in Canada against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But Thursday starts the main event of the NCAA tournament. The actual tournament does indeed start tonight with a couple of first 4 matchups tomorrow and Wednesday before the round of 64 starts on Thursday. So we know, gentlemen, that the SEC received 14 bids to the NCAA tournament, the all-time record. The previous record was 11 from the Big East in 2011. And the question I think a lot of people have is, what will it take for the SEC to demonstrate that this past season was the best conference season in recent, if not all, of NCAA history? Joe Rexrode wrote a column at The Athletic. The headline, SEC made NCAA tournament history, but its performance from here will be defining. Jared Stillman also discussed this topic on his show yesterday. This is what Jared Stillman had to say about the SEC entering the NCAA tournament.
I don't look at the SEC and think, man, this league is just head and shoulders better than everybody else. The committee's telling me that. When the ACC gets 4 teams in, North Carolina only got in because the system is probably corrupt. But at the same time, like I watched Louisville and Duke play, and I watched the SEC play, and I'm not convinced Louisville and Duke can't play with the SEC team. So go prove it.
That was Jared Stillman yesterday. In his column at The Athletic, Joe Rexrode writes, quote, in other words, with the 14 bids, the NCAA selection committee just echoed what people who cover the sport have been saying since December. This is the most dominant men's basketball league we've seen in years, decades, maybe ever. Now the NCAA tournament will confirm or deny that as historical fact. Don't blow it, SEC. Here's how you avoid that. Get 6 in the Sweet 16, 3 in the Elite 8, 2 in the Final 4, and 1 team cutting nets on April 7th in San Antonio as the SEC's first champion since Kentucky in 2012. That's all. Actually, if you produce the champion, 1 in the Final 4 will do. See? Even easier. So my question to both of you is, what is the minimum that the SEC must accomplish in this tournament to live up to its best conference ever talk this regular season?
I think you got to have at least 1 team in a championship game, considering how dominant and how consistent this league has been throughout the year. And then as the season is winding down, you're listening to guys and girls that really know basketball, really know college basketball, and they're telling you the SEC tournament may be tougher than the field of 68. You know, we ain't got some Joe Schmo telling us that. We got the people that are in the know, the people that really pay attention to college basketball year in and year out. So when that is being said, I think anything short, again, they don't need to win the championship, I don't think. But anything short of having a team representing your conference in the championship game, I think it would be a disappointment for the conference as a whole, because you got 3 or 2 of the top 2 seeds in all of college basketball. Then you have number 2 seeds and 3 and 4. So you have the top half, basically the top half of your conference representing one of the top 6 spots in each region.
Yes, you have 2 number 1 seeds in Auburn and Florida, 2 number 2 seeds in Tennessee and Alabama, a 3 seed in Kentucky, and a 4 seed in Texas A&M. And Willie, you mentioned this during the break. Just because of where these teams are located in the bracket, they're going to pick each other off potentially. Auburn could face Texas A&M in the Sweet 16. Tennessee could face Kentucky in the Sweet 16. So they're going to pick each other off. That's
if
just
they win.
If they win. But that's just the nature of having 14 teams in a 68-team field. So what's the answer to that question for you, Willie? What do you need to see from the SEC at a minimum for it to be able to live up to the hype that it had in the regular season?
I think it stands to reason that from a legacy purpose, for it to be the all-time greatest league. And let's start by saying this. Comparing college basketball today and comparing it to 1990, 1980, 1970, it's a different game. It's a professional game now. That's one of the reasons why the SEC is starting to separate itself. It's just starting, and it's only going to separate further, in my opinion, as teams get better and better at learning how to delve out the resources. The SEC is going to dominate. The SEC is now head and shoulders above the ACC in how they apply resources. That would have been ridiculous to say in 1990 or 2000 or 2010. The ACC has the tradition. They care more about basketball, but they don't have the resources to spend on the players. And so we're seeing that now. That being said, it's a tournament. It's not a 7-game series. It's a 1-game thing. That's the beauty of the tournament. So I think they have absolutely earned the seedings and the teams in there that they've gotten. Their winning percentage, I think, outside of league games was something like 89%.
88.9%,
Yeah.
according to Joe Rexford.
Okay. And it was interesting during the season, the conference play, their winning percentage was 50%.
I've heard that one.
Remember that
twice.
whole counter average? It was only 50% in conference game. Of course, that was the conference record in every league.
Yeah.
But they've earned this. They dominated the ACC in that challenge. That was
14-2, if I recall correctly.
That's correct. And it was just 1 game. So Jared's point about, is Louisville that much worse? No, they're not. But over the course of the season, and I do think Louisville got a bad seed. They should not be an 8 seed. That was weird to go 18-2 in a league and be 8. That's not something's wrong there.
That tells you what they think about the league as a whole.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think that the SEC got the good seeds. So I'm not going to put a number on it. I think we'll just get a feel for it. But a couple of these teams, the more teams in, the more teams you have to make a run, but also more teams you have to get upset in the first round. So you might have 3 teams that make a great run and 3 teams that get on that list of teams that went down in the first round as, a 3 seed that lost to a 14. So you're going to see a mix of all of this stuff. But I think at the end of the day, when we get to the Final Four, I'd be surprised if they don't have 2 there in the Final Four.
I think it'd be a big disappointment if they don't get at least 2 teams in the Final Four in the team to represent the SEC in a championship game. Either, unless even with them being on opposite sides, I still believe they need to have a team that represent, because they talked about, why do we hold, at least for you and I, Willie, why do we hold, the Big East to such high esteem? Because what they were able to accomplish back then, they were the dominant force
in the 80s. So when they had 3, in 85, they had 3 of the 4.
And then end up winning the I think did they end up winning the championship, or they lost to who won?
No,
that
Villanova beat Georgetown that
Raleigh
year.
Massimino. They
Yeah.
beat,
The only
Georgetown.
team that wasn't the Big East was Memphis.
Yes.
And they lost to Villanova in the first in the Final Four.
Yes,
Yeah, because
yes.
Georgetown beat St. John's.
So we look at the Big East and we see how, as they were the dominant conference and they represented well in the Big East, in March Madness, but in that particular year, they were the dominant conference from beginning to end. And when I mean end, I mean winning the championship. That's why we look at the Big East. At least that's why I look at the Big East in such a way, because when I was growing up, that Big East was basketball, and they proved it year in and year out. That's what the SEC, over the last 2 years, they probably have had, at least I know this year, but even last year, they may have had, over the last course of the 2 years, the best conference in college basketball, period. You got to come out with something.
Yeah,
In these last 2 years. You got to come out with a championship. Somebody, One of these SEC teams got to come out with a championship.
But Duke and Houston, to me, are teams that could
Oh, of
absolutely
course,
win.
absolutely.
They're, especially if Flag's okay.
Michigan State can win. There are other teams out there that I've watched that play really good basketball, but because the SEC has been so dominant, a lot of people zero in on the basketball that's around, especially when it's good. So they don't go outside the SEC, because they feel I can get a good game each and every night just watching the SEC. I don't need to go to the Big Ten or the ACC or out west when there are a lot of good teams out there, like you said. You point to Louisville and Duke, teams like that have the potential to go out there and upset you and win. Houston is another team that people, I don't know if they're sleeping on them, but they got a hell of a team.
Well, they choked last year.
Yeah, they choked,
early
exactly.
on, but they have what it takes. But remember what we've been seeing in the last couple of years too. You've seen a Florida Atlantic.
Yes.
You've seen some other teams that you didn't know much about. You've seen 6 teams beat ones twice now.
St. Peter's a few years ago.
St. Peter's. But as these teams evolve, I thought Rick Barnes made a great point on Sunday night. They were like, you should beat Wofford or whatever. He goes, well, Wofford, who's to say they don't have the next Chaz Lanier, who came from a lower level program, Dalton Connect. Like these are where these guys are before they transfer to some of these SEC schools. So everybody's got good players. A lot of teams have older players. I think the tournament is set up to where the little guys are way better than you realize because they're older. They've got guys who have transferred down, transferred up. They don't get hype, but I think some of these teams are a lot better than they used to be. So just because you have 3 or 4 teams get upset, which I think is obviously got a chance to happen a lot. Like Georgia's a 9, Vanderbilt's a 10. You got a lot of teams that have a 50-50 game in the first round. 3 of them could be out after 1 round. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to have 2 in the Final Four. I don't know how many in the Sweet 16 and all that stuff. I'm not going to worry about it that much. They've earned these seeds, but this NCAA tournament is different than it was 5-10 years ago. The probability of upsets to me is higher.
You mentioned the Big East in 1984-85. Rexroad uses the 83-84 ACC as the opposite example. That ACC won more than 89% of its non-league games. The closest since was this season's SEC at 88.9%. But Rexroad writes, quote, so what do people remember about that ACC season? Probably Michael Jordan and North Carolina losing to Indiana in the Sweet 16, which was part of an underwhelming 8-5 record for the league, including Mike Krzyzewski's Duke Blue Devils falling in an early upset as a number 3 seed. Even Virginia making a surprise Final Four run as a number 7 seed the year after Ralph Sampson departed couldn't even offset the overall disappointment. So,
but if you look at the players in that league, it was unbelievable.
Yes.
And remember back then, we're talking about guys who stayed 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a different game, which is why it's a great debate of what's the best. You got a professional game now where everybody's a free agent every year, and a game that's a little less professional back then.
Well,
but guys stayed for 3 or 4 years.
COVID is telling you it's better that these guys stay. Why? Because some of these guys that would have never seen, they understand a 3rd or 4th, maybe even a 5th, sometimes even a 6th year.
Yeah.
And the basketball.
And those aren't the elite
Exactly.
Jordan kind of guys or James Worthy, but they're really good college players.
And they're making college basketball as a whole better.
Yes,
They're
agreed.
staying.
To me, I see the bare minimum is half of the Final Four. I think the SEC needs to have at least 2 teams playing in the Final Four. Now, it could happen in the national semifinals. Florida could play Auburn in the national semifinals. Alabama could play Tennessee in the national semifinals. But to me, I think it needs to be at least 2 teams in the Final Four and 1 team in the national title game. I know a lot of people listening are probably going to say the SEC needs to win the national championship. But to Willie's point, this field in this day and age, the upsets are far more prevalent than they were back in the 80s, for example. I don't have the numbers on it. I'm sure somebody has crunched those numbers. So one of these top SEC teams is not going to make it. And there's going to be a shocking upset. It doesn't have to be in the SEC, of course, but there will be. There always are shocking upsets. But to me, I do think that the SEC needs to have at least half of the representatives in the Final Four. And it's doable. It's absolutely doable. But I think it'll be tougher than maybe people realize.
But I mean, if your conference has been that conference all year, and it's not like this has just been a consistent conference, and you got one or two teams that are really good, and everybody else is sort of in the middle of the pack. No, you have a legitimate three teams that can win the national championship, and probably even more than that. If it's 3 or 4 teams, you got to get at least one of those teams, and they're number one seeds too. You got to get at least one of those number one seeds, or possibly 2 of the top 2 or 3 seeds in the Final Four, and one of them have to represent you as a conference in the championship game.
615-737-1025. So that question, I've laid it out for all of you. 615-737-1025. What is the minimum the SEC must accomplish in the NCAA tournament for you to feel that the SEC can back up its best conference ever talk, having 14 teams in the field more than any other conference in any single year in NCAA tournament history? 615-737-1025. But coming up next, Devin McLaughlin, Vanderbilt basketball forward, will join us. Vanderbilt kicks off its NCAA tournament on Friday against St. Mary's. We will talk to Devin McLaughlin. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. Hey, listen, the sun is starting to come out. It's about to heat up. And I know you've been wearing those sweaters and those big sweatpants. And I know the moment it starts getting hot and you start making your goal, you start setting your goals, and you look and you say, man, I want to drop a couple extra pounds, man, before the sun really comes out and before it really gets hot. So I got some solutions for you, because I know you've set your goals just like everybody else and just like myself. When winter comes around, you gain a few pounds, you set some goals to lose those few pounds. And at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration each and every time you go through this cycle, each and every year. They understand it, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. Hey, it's getting hot. Them sweaters are coming off. So you need to go to my good friends at Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
Need a bracket to fill out for the NCAA men's tournament? Head to theGameNashville.com and download or print off your bracket today. Presented by Toyota. Fuel your adrenaline at Toyota.com. Toyota, let's go places. Also brought to you by TheNewCumberland.com, Twin Peaks, and Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, we go to our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com and welcome in Vanderbilt forward Devin McLaughlin. Devin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course, Vanderbilt opens the I keep on saying the SEC tournament. The SEC tournament is over. Vanderbilt opens the NCAA tournament on Friday, a 2:15 tip-off against St. Mary's. But let's go back to Selection Sunday. Devin, the team lost its final few games of the season. You put yourself in position to make the NCAA tournament, but I'm curious what the mood was like at the facility as you were watching the selection show. What was it like for you?
Yeah, the nerves are high, but we had a strong season, and I know we didn't end it how we wanted it to, but I thought we had good wins over the season, and the nerves are high, but I'm glad we got in.
What's the schedule like for you over the next few days? You play on Friday. So when did you start game planning for St. Mary's? When do you travel to Cleveland for the first round game? What's your schedule between now and Friday?
I think we're going to start scouting St. Mary's today, and then we're going to head over there tomorrow, I believe. But yeah, yesterday was more of a day for getting our bodies right for the game after our long stretch of games we had. And I think everyone's healthy, so we're going to give it our all.
So what's your early impression of St. Mary's? Wins the West Coast Conference regular season title. St. Mary's and Gonzaga usually are the two teams battling it out in that conference. I know you said you're going to be starting your scouting today, but what is your early read on St. Mary's as an opponent?
My early read is they're a good team. I've caught a couple of their games this season. They're big, they're fundamental, and but I think they're a good matchup for us. I think we're going to have a good game plan for them. Coach B is a great coach at game planning, so I think we're going to be ready for them come Friday.
We'll talk with Devin McLaughlin, Vanderbilt's forward. Now, Devin, this team was put together by Byington at the beginning of the season. Obviously, you're part of this. He didn't have a team come in, but then he brought a bunch of you guys in, and you guys have answered the bell the whole season. You played a physical brand of basketball that we haven't seen Vandy play in a while, and it's helped you guys in that process. But as you're headed into the tournament, when you got guys like Hoggard on your team that have been, to tournaments before prior with Michigan State, do you guys lean on him more with his experience?
Yeah, he's been doing a great job of just coaching the guys that haven't been. I feel like him and Jalen Carey, I know he went last year, but he's been doing a good job of just getting us ready for the tournament, telling what it's like taking lead, and that's just as his older guys too, like Grant Huffman, he's been there before, and grad students like Chris Mannion, but they have all just been coaching up the rest of the team. So, yeah.
Now you're going against the St. Mary's team that, when it comes to defense, they have a really good defensive efficiency. You guys, again, I go back to the brand of basketball that you guys have been played, but also that brand of basketball has put you and Carey in positions where you're not on the court in the second half as much. Has Coach Byington talked with you and Carey in particular about how important it is for you two to stay on the court?
Yeah, him and all the media, they all been telling me and Jalen that we need to be on the court, and when we're on the court together. So it's been an emphasis for us, and we're gonna do a good job moving forward.
We're talking to Devin McLaughlin, post player for the Vanderbilt Commodores, heading out to Cleveland to take on, in the first round, St. Mary's. So, Devin, I want to ask you about that part of the game. It sounds easy to, hey, just don't foul, but anybody who's watched the league night in and night out, it's so different than maybe it was before. They're not calling charges as much. There's just a lot of banging that goes on. So how tough has that been for you, as sometimes a guy that's guarding somebody a little bit bigger than you, to hold your ground, play tough defense without fouling?
It's tough. I'm probably the shortest big in the league, but I play hard. I play physical, and it just depends how they're calling the game that day. Me and Jalen, we're smaller, but I feel like we have more strength, so we use that to our advantage. And yeah, it's hard when they're coming down to the rim and we're trying to contest the shots. It just depends on how they're calling it. But we've doing drills and practicing, walling up, and yeah, we've been doing a good job of it.
So how do you know when it's time to try to take the charge? Because back in the day, you know, Adam Vingan will find this interesting because he's a Duke fan. Duke probably invented the flop way back in the day, right? But they used to call a lot more charges. They didn't have the semicircle in there. It's changed a lot. So how do they teach you how to draw a charge and when it's better to just try to hold your ground and sort of absorb the contact?
Yeah, because of the new calls, we haven't really been taking that many charges. We've been more focusing on walling up and doing our work early instead of taking the charge. But the charges do come in the game, maybe on ball. But yeah, when we're off the ball, we try to wall up and just make a miss.
Take me back to your experience in the transfer portal, because it's such a unique story with the Vanderbilt program. So tell me how you met Coach Byington and how you decided this was the place, because you had a great unknown, I'm sure, but you guys have come together and made this a really special season.
Yeah, Coach B did a great job of just crafting the team how he wanted it. And Coach B has such an attraction, like his the way he carries the program, the way he coaches, the way the freedom he gives, and yeah, he just got the players that he wanted. And we've gelled very good. I feel like we've been getting better as the season goes on, and that's just a nod to Coach B putting this good squad together.
So when you went in there, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think you had a pretty good chance of having a lot of choices? How did you make the choice for Vanderbilt and based on the expectations?
Yeah, I thought I'd have a decent amount of choices to choose from. Coach B, he was early, so that and he really put the full court press. And I really fell in love with Vandy. Vandy was a great school. I knew the SEC was going to be a very strong league. That's also what I wanted to play. I wanted to play the best basketball I could in college, and so that's what's really attractive at Vanderbilt.
And for people that don't know, you went to Boston College as a walk-on, correct?
I actually was not a walk-on.
Does that get out there? I've heard people throw that out there. Is that so? How did that get out?
I don't know, but yeah, I wasn't a walk-on though.
Okay, good. Well, that's probably your parents probably like hearing that too. So they didn't have to pay that bill. But so Devin, let's talk about going forward here. So much has been made about the depth of the SEC, and there's just no easy games at all. I was at the South Carolina game where you had the big tip in. South Carolina's got to be the best 2-14 team or 2-16 team that's ever been in a league like that, because they're pretty good. But are you guys looking forward to just getting a chance to play somebody outside the league for the first time in a while?
Yeah, I mean, every day's been a battle in the SEC. You know, it'll be good to see some new faces. Yeah, just get a new scout, get a new feel for everything, and I feel like we're going to give St. Mary's our best shot.
What do you think was the most important thing early on to be able to gel like you guys have? It probably took me as a former player watching you guys, because I watch the games every year, but it probably took me 3, 4, 5 games just to realize which guy's which guy came from which school. It's a process. So what was that like in the summer? What was the key to gelling so fast?
The key to gelling in the summer, it was tough. It was difficult because we didn't really play any games together, because that's how you really like learn your teammates. So when we started playing games, like going to war, losing, winning, highs, lows, that's when we really started to gel together. And as the season went on, I felt like we just kept getting tighter as a team, and that really helped our program.
So I think it's fair to say that you guys were a little bit worn down, a little bit. A couple of guys got banged up. You had a little thinner bench, I know, for the last couple of games. What has been the mindset of sort of hitting the reset button? I heard Coach talking about the other day, it was the first time in a while you guys had a practice with everybody out there and feeling a little bit healthy. So how have you guys tried to make use of these extra days to sort of recharge?
Yeah, we've been hitting the rehab. Our strength and conditioning coach has been really hitting the stretches and stuff, and definitely the cold tub as well. And we've just been taking this time to just regroup and come back together how we were a couple of weeks ago. And I thought we're going to be doing a good job of it.
Vanderbilt forward Devin McLaughlin joining us here on D-Mace.
Adam, when's the last time you had the cold tub?
Never.
D-Mace, are you a cold tub guy?
When I was playing, I would prescribe to the cold, but right about now, I'm too old.
I'll stick to the hot tub, not the cold tub.
Thank you.
Devin McLaughlin joining us on the program. Devin, thank you so much for your time. Good luck on Friday against St. Mary's.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Devin McLaughlin joining us here. Vanderbilt forward. Remember, Vanderbilt kicks off its NCAA tournament on Friday, a 2:15 tip-off approximately against St. Mary's, and we will have that game for you live right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The 10th seeded Commodores against the 7th seeded St. Mary's Gales in Cleveland, Ohio. 615-737-1025. We will continue our discussion on the NCAA tournament. Some interesting comments from an old school coach. One thing that I think is going to be discussed a lot as the NCAA tournament kicks off tonight, but really in earnest on Thursday. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
5 years ago, I wasn't, on conversation saying how much you want to be paid. Never thought that would happen in college basketball. And I've always been a big proponent as the game and money has evolved and changed. I've never been one that said I don't believe student athletes shouldn't be paid. But the way it is now is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And it's changed our game. And so you got to adapt. We got to adapt, but every coach, every handshake I have now before games, that's brought up. Every game. Me and the opposing coach are going to talk about portal issues. And, where's academics at? Like I've talked to my compliance guys. What's APR anymore? You can't control APR. It's a JUCO. You're going to replace 8-9 guys to a roster every year. The travel time that is across the country in these leagues. It makes no sense for that to be our model, but that is our model. So more than us, do we have to evolve as coaches? Yeah, we got to evolve of how now we recruit. Like, it used to be, hey, what's my degree going to look like? What's your facilities look like? What's your relationship with the team look like? Are you there for all practices? Are you a coach that dives into relationships and you're going to care for my child? You might as well throw all that stuff out because the only question they're concerned about is what they're getting paid in the portal.
That was Nevada basketball coach Steve Alford the other day. Steve Alford, an accomplished coach, an accomplished player, an old school player. Indiana, right, Willie?
Yes.
Steve Alford?
Won a national championship. He was probably the most important player on the 87 national title team for Bobby Knight in Indiana.
If you've never seen that man shoot the ball, man, you missed something special.
He was awesome.
Oh, my goodness.
The early days of the NCAA three-point line, he took
Yes.
full advantage.
Exactly.
So now he's coaching Nevada. And after Nevada was eliminated from its conference tournament, that was part of a larger response on the state of college basketball. And as we now enter the time of the calendar when everybody watches college basketball, I always get a kick out of whenever Jared brings up the topic of college basketball. He talks about how he does it, and he's not alone, about how a lot of people don't really start paying attention to college basketball until football season is over. Now, the three of us, I would say, we're pretty devoted college basketball fans. We have teams that we root for. Now, I don't watch every non-Duke game during the regular season, but I keep up with the sport because it's my favorite sport to watch. But a lot of people are going to be tuning into the NCAA tournament, as they do every March, who don't normally pay attention to college basketball. And I do think that this conversation about name, image, and likeness and things and the transfer portal and things of that nature, it's going to be bubbling up to the surface here now as we start this exciting run to the Final Four.
It's really behind the scenes that all of this goes on, and we have a great opportunity to talk to football coaches about this, baseball coaches. I'm sure we'll have this discussion again. It is madness. It really is behind the scenes. Now, the product that fans are going to see when they watch is a great product. I've said it all around. I have been thoroughly immersed. I have had a lot of enjoyment watching, not just Vanderbilt games or SEC games, but I've enjoyed watching college basketball throughout the country because the product is good. Guys can shoot, from those longer three-point ranges. It's opened up the middle of the court. They've got the block charge thing, I think, under pretty good control, even though it does create some interesting dynamics with the banging that we just talked about with Devin McLaughlin. The reviews are a pain. They're annoying. That's going to be a problem. But what Steve Alford's talking about, I've been saying from the start, I feel like I'm in the minority, and I think a lot of fans probably just don't care. But Steve Alford went on to say this, because it wasn't a woe is me. He was like, hey, look, I know this is what I signed up for, and this is, you got to adapt or die. You get out. And some coaches did get out.
A lot of prominent coaches.
Yeah, like Jay Wright got out.
Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams.
Nick Saban in football.
Nick Saban.
Doesn't want any part of this. This is not what they want to do. They want to develop young men. They want to have them build a fun relationship with their teammates and grow together for 3-4 years.
College teams have general managers now.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen anymore. It's completely different. And so, Rick Neuheisel had a great point when we talked to him, one of your former coaches, about the football part of it. It's the same thing in basketball.
Yeah.
If you play for 2 or 3 schools and you make $500,000 or something, that's great. But what was your experience like? And what are the ramifications of doing it that way? Like when you get married 10, 15 years, or 5, 10 years after college, who are your groomsmen? Right? Is it some guy you played 1 year with? And does he really know you? Like, I know the people that I went to school with, they know me better than anybody else, right? Or outside of my family,
Exactly.
right? And I could go not seeing them for 10 or 15 years, some of my teammates. I get together, they know exactly what I haven't changed. That's a little bit in jeopardy when you're a free agent every year, and not just the families, but the players are like, where can I make the most money next year? It's crazy. So Alford's point also was this. You got guys that are supporting their families with their NIL right now. Not just putting a little extra money in your pocket so you can go home and visit your family or have a little spending money on campus, maybe even buy a nice car. You're taking this and you are helping your family get by. You're 18 or 19 or 20 years old when this is going on. So when you're 25 and you're done playing and you go from having an income, let's say you made $750K or something, which is not unreasonable for what some of these guys are making in NIL. And then your first job is for $75,000. If you got your degree, if you were going to class and paying any attention, because why would you if you're making a lot of money? Hey, do I need to go to class? I've just made $750K. That money's going to go fat. Like, what is that experience? Steve Alford really was eloquent, I thought, in pointing out some of these things. But does the average fan care? I don't know.
No, the average fan doesn't care. I don't think, not to a point where they're gonna make it, a front page story in a sense. They're not gonna complain because, even if you want to complain, you still want those players. Even if you complain about, man, they're paying these guys and these girls too much money in NIL, but you want one of those guys and girls on your team. So yes, the whole NIL to me has just been a double-edged sword. Listen, for so many years, and I had this talk yesterday with Jill Nick on her new podcast that'll be coming up pretty soon about the whole NIL. The problem was, and Willie, we've discussed this, and even while we've been together as DVD, the arrogance of the NCAA, long time ago. The arrogance of the NCAA, while they were making money hand over fist, they said, take this $15,000, $8,000 scholarship, take it and shut up. Mm-hmm. While they were making 1,000,000 times that off of that number which you were wearing on the football field or on the basketball court or on the baseball diamond, collectively all together. And I'm talking about the big programs. So for many years, they said, just take that education. That's worth more than anything that we could ever give you. Until they started, signing these mega deals with these companies, these, 10, 50, 10-year deals over billions of dollars where none of this was really going to the players. So they all got smart and said, listen, we need a cut of this. No longer are we going to sit by and let you collect money off of our backs. And then the NCAA said, you know what? Go ahead. Do what you want to without putting any guardrails. And that's where we're at, a place with no guardrails. Listen, if you feel that your name, image, and likeness is worth X amount of dollars, then go out there and try to get it. I can't tell you not to. What I can say is, for the sport as a whole, no longer are we going to get, say the Fab Five staying together 2-3 years.
Can you imagine bidding on the Fab Five after their first year?
That first year, that whole team would have been broken up if we were in the NIL.
Possibly, at least one or two of them.
They may not even come together, considering, who was on that team, that starting five.
That's a really
Two-
interesting point.
2 out of 5 may have went to Michigan, say Jalen and Chris, but the rest of them probably would have went somewhere else. Why? Because they would have got bigger deals somewhere else.
Well, that was one of Alford's points that he made, which I thought was a good one. He says, it's not name, image, and likeness.
No.
He said, name, image, and likeness would be, hey, in fact, if I remember correctly, in the book Season on the Brink, which is John Feinstein's greatest book, Steve Alford is a central character in that book because he was an up-and-comer. It was the year before they won the national title. I think Steve Alford had some kind of deal with a calendar that was sold in the campus bookstore that he was pictured in, and it was an unintentional violation because they were being sold with his name, image, and likeness. They had, this is our best player, let's put him on the calendar. You can't do that back then. You couldn't. Now, that would be an example of name, image, and likeness. Steve Alford was number 12 in Indiana. Number 12 jerseys sold in the bookstore. That's a great example of how you could get some NIL money because of your name, image, and likeness. But Steve Alford points out that's not what it is. It's, hey, Adam, do you want to play for me? Adam says, yes. How much are you going to pay me? All right, I'll pay you $100,000 to come here. Deal. That's not name, image, and likeness. That's a professional
That's
contract.
free agency.
That's a free agent professional contract. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's why the SEC has 14 teams in, because they got bigger payrolls than the ACC and the other conferences outside of maybe the Big Ten.
I think the point Alford was making as well is that it's one thing if you go to a school and you become a successful player and then you cash in on your name, image, and likeness versus
You
I'm
get it
going
on
to
the front
pay
end.
you to come. And
Yes.
that's the difference here.
Well, the argument also, I would sort of, push back on just a little bit on Alford's. Well, it's not name, image, and likeness because they're giving you the money prior. No, they're giving you the money for services already rendered in high school. That's where they're giving it to you. They're not going to give it to me when I'm averaging 0.0 points a game.
Or
They're
at your
not coming to
previous
me.
stop in
Exactly,
college, right? Whether it's
absolutely.
depending on where you're getting that player.
Exactly. So if I'm in high school and I am 15 out of the top 100, well, you're going to pay me based upon what I did in high school, based upon my name, image, and likeness in high school, the jersey that I wore, the points that I put up. It's more so because of the points and everything, but my name
I
and
see
my
what you're
image,
saying.
everything comes with that.
It's your likeness and your stats,
Exactly.
right?
Likeness and
Let's
stats,
take
yes.
Malik Dia, right? Malik Dia from Nashville, Ensworth, goes to Vanderbilt for 1 year, not playing a whole lot, transfers, goes to Belmont, has great success with Belmont, and then wheels that into going to Ole Miss, and he got paid substantially in the NIL and the portal because he was like, hey, look, I got a lot to offer here. Belmont's got limited resources, so let's basically turn pro.
Yeah.
But in a sense, I see what you're saying, that you can put that under the umbrella of his name,
Yes.
his image. Likeness, I'm not really sure. You're not buying a video game version of Malik Dia. That would be a likeness.
Not yet. Not yet.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the state of college basketball, college athletics, NIL, all of those things. 615-737-1025. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick is proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never too ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you live at Bridgestone Arena. The Nashville Predators kick off a 3-game homestand tonight against the St. Louis Blues. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6 with Chase McCabe in for Max Hurst today, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. So earlier today when we were talking to Tim Hasselbeck, I referred to Mel Kiper's latest mock draft at ESPN.com. And we spent some time last week talking about veteran wide receivers. We talked about Stephon Diggs and Tyler Lockett, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp. But the Titans have a high second round pick, number 35 in the second round, with which they can take a receiver. And there is a receiver that has fallen down draft boards recently, and I'm not exactly sure why. And that is Luther Burden III out of Missouri. So in Mel Kiper's latest mock draft at ESPN.com, Luther Burden is not a first-round pick. I went back and looked at Mel Kiper's first mock draft of the season back in January. He had Burden at number 12 in that mock draft. So over the past couple of months, Burden went from a top 12 pick to out of the first round. The Titans have a need, Derek Mason, for a receiver. Luther Burden entered the season as arguably the top receiving prospect in college football, had a 1,200-yard receiving season in 2023, 1,212 yards, 9 touchdowns. Had a disappointing season relative to that last season with Missouri, 676 yards, 6 touchdowns on 61 receptions. But I'm just curious as to why his draft prospects are falling. He ran a 4.41 40 at the NFL Combine, 6 feet tall, 206 pounds, 8.5-inch hands. So there's an opportunity here, it seems, for the Tennessee Titans. Luther Burden, I thought, would not be a receiver who would be available to them. But it appears he could be available at the top of the second round. What are your thoughts on Burden as a prospect and why you think he may be falling on draft board?
Why he's fallen, I have no idea. If you just look at the metrics, the numbers, he ran well at the combine. He caught the ball pretty good at the combine. Now, if you watch the tape, and compare last year to the year prior, you wonder why did his production drop so drastically. You mentioned the 1,200 yards that he had in his sophomore year. Then him after that, everything continued to diminish. And it wasn't just his stats, the offense as a whole, the passing game as a whole regressed at Missouri. But if you watch him on tape, there's one thing that I am sort of alarmed by is these drops that happen in the game with him. And it seems like they are lack of concentration drops. They're easy catches. It's not like he's battling with two guys or guys draped on him. No, you're talking about him dropping essentially glorified handoffs, hitch routes, bubble screens, stuff like that if you watch his whole tape, you would think like, whoa, why is this happening? Part of it, lack of concentration at times, and every receiver goes through it. But I think another part is maybe his hands are on the smallish side. And maybe he's not a true natural catcher in the sense of a guy that, that has no problem with going out there catching the ball. He catch it with he's fluid in his motions in regards to getting in and out of his breaks, and his hands seems to be always in really good position to catch the football. So that could be a contributing factor. But if you look at the tape, not only do I like him as a wide receiver, I like him as a return man. He shows the ability, just like Matthew Golden, he shows the ability not only to beat you on the outside, but also if you want to put him back there as a punt returner or a kickoff returner, he can bring that dimension to a team that truly do needs it, meaning the Tennessee Titans.
Let me ask you, Derek, about having the drops. And as you would evaluate a college wide receiver, is there such a thing as just having a slump for a few games where you drop some
yeah.
balls and but
Absolutely.
that maybe would not indicate that you have bad hands?
Oh, absolutely. But then you want to just look at a guy, and that's why you need to watch the whole film. Is it just a game? Was it just that game? Or did these things sort of pop up during the season more times than not? There has been situations, if you watch the film, where easy routine pass, and again, listen, receivers drop footballs. Okay, that's how it is. But for a guy that when it's not contested and you're dropping more than what you truly should, then that would be a concern for scouts. Because listen, if you're dropping them, with basically nobody around you, what happens when you get in the NFL and guys are draped on you? That's another thing that he didn't have to deal with. The tight coverage, and it's not just a Luther Burden III problem. It's a lot of these receivers that are coming out there not getting pressed. They're not having to do some of the things that they find themselves now having to do at the pro level. Get off press, read coverages as you're running. In college, basically, when you line up, the coverage is set. You know exactly what it's going to be, so it's easier to find the holes when it's zone or know when it's man-to-man. Well, in the NFL, it's not that way. And these guys, it may take them a year, 2 years to really hone in. Their athletic ability may get them, springboard them off, but it's going to be their knowledge of the game and how they develop as a receiver that's going to keep them flying, or they just going to hit the pavement and crash, because eventually, good defensive backs pick up on that.
Sam Monson, formerly of Pro Football Focus, he's now part of the 33rd Team website and podcast network. This was Sam Monson on Luther Burden.
I'm torn on Burden because I really like him as a receiver prospect, but there's a lot of projection involved, and the projection at wide receiver these days scares me more than it used to because I've been burned so many times. Burden is ridiculous after the catch, right? Like stupid good after the catch. I forget, he's got like 30 broken tackles last year alone, 30 in a single season for a wide receiver. That's nuts. This was in the down year that people are like criticizing him for. 30 broken tackles. He's got 65 over 3 years. You know who that's like?
OBJ?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it is. Now, OBJ, better prospect, way more complete receiver when he was coming out. There was so much more on tape that you could project immediately. You didn't need to project. It was there, right? We could see him running legitimate routes, being a real NFL wide receiver coming out of that offense. There's more projection with Burden, but he's got that OBJ Giants era after the catch dynamism where he's just so hard to stop. And I think he can do the other stuff as well, but that's the projection. So I think he's really good, but I'm kind of scared of him in the first round.
What do you think about that, Derek?
Wide receiver translator.
Thank you, Frazier. We needed that.
You say he's really good. He's really good, and he's reminiscent of OBJ. OBJ was the 13th pick of the draft, if I'm not mistaken, the 12th pick in the draft. So if he's OBJ-like, and he's a tremendous receiver, and he
was the 12th overall pick in the 2014
his
draft.
Ability to his break tackle, percentage is high.
Well, first of all, do you agree with that comparison? When you look at Luther Burden, what you see on tape, and what you know of Odell Beckham?
I don't think I said Odell Beckham when I saw him. I don't think I said that. Again, every guy, it's easy to sort of say, well, he looks like that guy.
Yes.
Or he reminds me of that guy. And I get it, because you're trying to look for some comparison when you're evaluating an individual. But again, if you say that's who you're compared to, you can't then say, well, he's out of the first round. You told me all these great things about him. He breaks tackles. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's dynamic. And I think that's why he's such a good return man, whether it be punt or kickoff, because his ability to break tackles and get up the field once he gets the ball in his hands. So if you're telling me all of this, coupled with that, why wouldn't he be a first rounder? I'm not saying he needs to be a top 12, top 15, but I don't think this year's draft is littered with that many wide receivers that I would say, well, Luther Bennett, I have found him to be dropping out of the first round. Okay, if he's out of the first round, Why? Just because you've been burned? That's not a good reason to put somebody out of the first round. If you watch it, if I'm watching the tape, and that guy reminds me of a guy that won the first round, and I see all these traits in him. I see the explosiveness in him. Okay, I'm not then going to say just because I didn't get it right last year with the 2 wide receivers in the first round, then I'm gonna demote him just to make myself look good. No, I see a first round talent, so I'm gonna say he's a first round projection. Where in the first round, I don't know, but he's projected to be a first round guy.
But what I don't understand, and this is what I have not seen, and if any of you listening have seen it, you can text us 615-737-1025. I have not seen why he has gone from a sure thing, sure thing, first round pick to being out of the first round. Mel Kiper in his latest mock draft, which was published today, no Luther Burden in the first round. In the first mock draft that Mel Kiper did in late January, 12th overall pick. So I'm just trying to figure out what has happened over the past 2 months where someone such as Luther Burden, who many people thought entering the season, actually, I went back and looked at, I think it was Jason Reed, one of the ESPN draft analysts, right after the 2024 draft, did his way too early 2025 draft, which I always find to be humorous. Right after one draft ends, you start predicting the draft the following year. He actually had the Titans trading down to 10 and taking Burden 10th overall. So Burden his stock was high. So I don't know why he has fallen. And it does lead to an interesting situation for the Titans, if this is true, to take a first round caliber receiver, or at least I thought was a first round caliber receiver, with that top of the second round pick to add to this collection of receivers.
I do wonder how much pressure will be on the Titans to take a receiver in the second round.
Yes.
I think the pressure is there. They have, who else do they have in their roster? I know they got Daquan Jackson. I know they got Oliver.
It's Calvin Ridley, basically.
Yeah.
Basically, it's Calvin Ridley and guys that need to show that they can play in this league.
But let's take, I feel like this came up
is it Oliver?
In the past.
Am I right?
Bryce Oliver?
I can't remember if it was,
yes, Bryce Oliver.
If it was last year or the year before. I think it was 2 years ago, where they got everybody barbecued the Titans. How could you not take a receiver? Well, what had happened was there was a run on receivers right before they picked. And I think they looked at the board and said, hey, we'd like to, I'm just speculating. Maybe we'd like to take a receiver here, but there's 4 guys that just got picked that we liked, and they're all gone. The next guy isn't as good, so let's take, I think they took Spears with the pick, and everybody was like, how could you take a running back with that? Well, they don't need a running back, they need a receiver. But if I think that's going to be the key, is if this is a deep draft and somebody like that does drop, that would be ideal. But you can't control some of these things, right? That's why everybody's going to say, you've got to have a receiver. But there's got to be somebody worthy of that pick that's sitting there.
Well, listen, if Luther Burden the third is sitting there at the top of the second round, which the Titans have, then based upon who else is there, I think that's something that you seriously got to think about. Because again, if you go out and you get your quarterback at number 1, this assuming they take
this is an if.
Yeah, this assuming that they take Cam Ward at number 1. I think it's going to be imperative that you pair him with a young receiver that he can grow with. I know Calvin Ridley is there, and he will be sort of the veteran presence and the guy you can rely on, but you need a young guy, a stud that you can grow with, that can become that sort of Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith type of combination. There's no slight to A.J. Brown, but A.J. Brown wasn't a draft pick of the Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown was acquired via trade. But when I look at these young studs that are getting married, that's why it's so critical for Minnesota to get it right with J.J. McCarthy. Why? Because they got them a young stud in Jefferson. That's why Cincinnati Bengals signed back Chase and Burrow. Why? Because those are 2 young studs with Hill. Now it makes up a trio of probably the best quarterback receiver combo in the National Football League right now. So that's what the Titans got to build. And if he's sitting there at the top of the first round, I do believe, if indeed you got your quarterback, I do believe you got to think very strong about pairing him either with a top flight wide receiver that slipped to the second round or a hell of a tight end.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Luther Burden apparently dropping down draft board, not even in Mel Kiper's first round mock draft that was published today. Again, when Mel Kiper did his first mock draft back in mid-late January, Burden was number 12 in that mock draft, now completely out of the first round. 615-737-1025. Tune in to 93.3 FM Totally Hits Nashville tonight for MTSU men's basketball. The Blue Raiders take on Chattanooga in the NIT tournament at 7 p.m. with the pregame beginning at 6:30. Coverage also available on the Totally Hits Nashville app and at totallyhitsnashville.com.
And Adam, real quick, can
Yes.
I throw this in there? My buddy Chip Walters, who is the voice of the Blue Raiders
Yes.
on radio, he says to make sure you know that tickets for that NIT game tonight against Chattanooga, all adult tickets are just $25, price set by the NIT. So that is not something they control. $25, and our general admission, early birds get the best seats. So jump in, support the Blue Raiders. Tickets for ages 2 to 17 are $15. So purchase online at goblueraiders.com/tickets.
All right. Well, there you have it. Blue Raiders tonight in the NIT. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063. The game.
I'm going to bring this to Shedeur Sanders. I think that he's a really good quarterback. I think he's been coached well to play the position. I think he knows how to play the position. I think he has things about him that translate to success long-term at the position in the NFL, okay? And I'm going to say this, and like people are going to hear it initially as an insult, and let me explain it. I think his upside is Andy Dalton. That's what I think Shedeur Sanders is because of what he is physically. Now, listen, Andy Dalton's thrown over 250 touchdown passes in the NFL. Like, he's been a wild success, but no one ever thought Andy Dalton was a top 5 pick. So, like, I don't know if I'm making that distinction clear enough. Like, that to me is the difference. It's no different than when Teddy Bridgewater came out and people thought I was being critical of Teddy Bridgewater when I said, look, I think his ceiling is Alex Smith. And like, Teddy Bridgewater didn't have Alex Smith's career, you know? And so I think when we're talking about that top 15, and I said the same thing to you guys about Mac Jones when he came out. Like, when the guy has athletic deficiencies, when you are going to play a sport that's got some of the most, you know, freakish athletes on the planet playing it, I do think if you're going to be talking about the rarefied air of the first 15 pick, I do think it matters. And so it's a long way for me to say, like, I do think people are going to feel like they've got a forced hand on Shedeur Sanders.
Tim Hasselbeck earlier on our program, a really interesting discussion about quarterbacks with Tim Hasselbeck. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. If you missed that conversation, you can find it wherever you prefer to find your podcasts. A really enlightening discussion with Tim Hasselbeck. And we got some reaction to that I want to get back to at 615-737-1025. Josh from Columbia on our text line says, elite physical traits mean nothing to me. Big tree, fall hard. I think accuracy is the most valuable trait a quarterback can have. You can't teach accuracy. Some of the greatest quarterbacks of the last 30 years were average bodies, elite accuracy, and decision-making. From Josh in Columbia. And that's really the one thing, right, that people point out about Shedeur Sanders is his accuracy.
Yeah, his ability to fit the ball in spaces and throw what receivers deem a catchable ball. He anticipates really well. And maybe that is because he doesn't, possess the strong arm that maybe a Cam Ward does. So him, anticipating is more so of his superpower rather than trying to drill the ball, between two defenders. So when people are making mention to Shedeur Sanders and some of the things that will be classified as an upside, the first thing comes out is his ability to throw the ball accurately, his ability to complete passes, his ability to throw the ball in the right spot. No, he doesn't have the strongest arm out there, but neither, did, Drew Brees, neither did Peyton Manning, not Peyton Manning. Well, toward the end, he didn't, but neither did Tom Brady. Some of these quarterbacks that we look at and we marvel at how they play the position. Not all of them have Will Levis type arms. They do it other ways, and that's Shedeur Sanders.
One thing that I thought was very compelling about what Tim was telling us, because I followed up the question about Sanders, and you were asking about Jackson Dart as well, who looks like, just like a lot of quarterbacks, moving up in stock as we could get closer to the draft. I said, because he was talking about the top 15, and I said, is Ward talented enough with a high enough ceiling that he's worth the first pick? And he had a really interesting answer there. He said, he thinks he's much closer to that level. First pick, I still don't know if I hear enough people saying, yeah, this guy's like Joe Burrow and Peyton Manning and guys who have been the first pick before, even Caleb Williams last year. I don't know if he's that guy. But what he did say about Ward, he said, because he's played so many games, it's so different than Anthony Richardson, who has got huge ceiling, right, with his tools, but we knew he hadn't played very much, and he's very young, and so that's a tough call, and the Colts are right now dealing with that. What do we do? He's not there. You can't send him to the minor leagues and go develop, at AAA for a while. You can't do that. But Cam Ward has played a lot of games. He said, so your percentage of miss should be lower because you can do a complete evaluation. There's so many plays and reps and dropbacks you can watch what he's got to evaluate. He said, so if you can, even if his floor is more like a Dalton or something like that, that would be worthy of the first pick in his mind, even if it's not a, quote, franchise quarterback. If he's a starter for 2 contracts and you've got that position set, then that's still a victory, even if it's not Joe Burrow or, quote, franchise guy.
Well, if you look at Andy Dalton's stats, percentages, completion percentage, everything, his first 8 or 9 years in Cincinnati. If you strip the name away and you say, this is what you're going to get from your quarterback, and you don't tell them where you drafted him at, I think people will look at it and be like, okay, you got yourself a good quarterback, a really good quarterback. You should be able to win with that quarterback. As a matter of fact, in today's football, you should be able to win a championship. I'm not saying you're going to win 3 or 4 in a row, but you should be at least able to win one with those stats. But then I tell you, well, he was your first pick in the NFL draft. You're going to look at it different now. You're going to look at it different. Oh,
right.
No.
Right.
I need some
Everybody
more.
wants
I
the
need
pie
some
in
more.
the sky
Exactly.
for the first pick.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm getting at. Whether you draft him number 1 or number 15, I understand the significance with the number 1 pick. But what are we trying to do here? We're trying to find good players to help the Tennessee Titans get better as a team and ultimately reach some of those goals that they want to achieve, which every team across the league want to. Win your division, get in the playoffs, win your division, and then win a Super Bowl. Well, if you can do it with those type of numbers, shouldn't that be okay? But people don't want those numbers at the number 1 pick. They want Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes wasn't drafted number 1 overall. You know who was? Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
And he hadn't gotten you that, right?
Yeah. Bryce Young.
And he hadn't got, and I'm not saying these guys are just bad players, but Super Bowls don't come along just because you got the number 1
Was
pick.
it Carson Palmer first overall?
Yeah. First overall.
There's a wide range of what
Exactly.
you get with the first overall.
Absolutely. So if I just strip down Andy Dalton's numbers, took the name off, and just say, this is your quarterback for 8 years, you would be like, oh, that's great. We should have some good victories. We should have went to the playoff damn near every year. But then I tell you, as your number 1 pick, you're gonna be like, nah, not really.
That's not good enough.
That's not good enough. Yeah.
We do have that clip from Tim that Willie was referencing. Here's what Tim had to say.
So, there should be way less mystery on Cam Ward than there is when you're drafting Mark Sanchez with 17 starts in college, or, Anthony Richardson's few starts, or Trey Lance's situation. Look, and I think that's one of the reasons why, people miss when they looked at, or I'll give you another example of a guy who played a lot of football. Go look at Bo Nix. So there's so much to evaluate and say, wait a second, and he has these physical traits, and he has that time on task. Yeah, this is worth it. So, yeah, I do think Cam Ward has the traits to make it worth it.
That was Tim's clip that you were referencing.
So he does think the ceiling is quite a bit higher with Ward than it is for the other quarterbacks in the mix here. But and he said the experience he's had with all of the reps should give you a better picture of what he's going to be.
Exactly.
Kyle on our text line says, maybe there are more elite quarterbacks, but because of the system they are drafted and they don't develop. Look at Sam Darnold, drafted by the worst franchise, or Ryan Tannehill. They get to a better system and they flourish. I
mean, elite quarterbacks, I'm not sure. But I think sometimes, where you're drafted or better yet, who you're drafted to at that position may dictate how your career starts off. Because I think if I'm any quarterback coming out now and every team in the league needed a quarterback, I'm going to Andy Reid. I'm begging to be drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. Why? Because I know Andy Reid will develop a quarterback. He's been known to develop. Look at all his quarterbacks that he's had. He's been able to develop quarterbacks. So I do agree somewhat with the statement, but I don't think there's there would be more elite quarterbacks. No, I just think there would be better. I think quarterbacks will be in better positions if the team that they went to was able to develop them in a way that you're playing winning football, and that's what the Titans have missed for damn near 20 years, if not 20 years, since drafting Steve McNair. After drafting Steve McNair, every guy that they've had hasn't made it to a second contract. Any quarterback that they drafted outside of Steve McNair, for one reason or another, have not been able to make it to a second contract.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Tim Hasselbeck's thoughts. Again, a really interesting conversation with Tim. They're all interesting, but I thought today's was particularly interesting. And if you missed that, you can find it wherever you find your podcast. 615-737-1025. We'll end the show today on a lighter, maybe slightly more disgusting note. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan. And D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick is presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Stillman and Company coming up next, live from Bridgestone Arena. Predators and Blues tonight at 7 o'clock. Pre-game at 6. Chase McCabe filling in for Max Hurst tonight. And Hal Gill filling in for Chris Mason tonight, Willie Donick?
That is correct.
Ah.
Hal Gill up in the booth. And the reason is there is an animated game that the NHL does every year, and the Predators are involved. The game is not until April the 1st, but there's a bunch of preparation that goes on for this. Max Hurst and Chris Mason are doing that game, so they're actually involved
So
up in
their
New York
faces
in
are-
the preparation.
Their faces are going to be animated.
Yes, I
Oh,
saw
can't
saw
wait to see
the
it.
animated renditions of Max and
And
Mason today. Could be better. Could be better. Could be better.
and these games, you've seen a lot of them.
It's
the,
funny though.
The NFL has done them.
Yes.
The NHL has done them. I know that they're incredibly popular with kids.
Yeah, it is really funny to look at the landmarks and the things downtown Nashville. That's part of the ambiance when you watch the game.
Uh-huh.
So I've gotten to
Now,
see
when
some
is
of that
this?
stuff. It's April 1st.
Okay, April 1st.
So I thought we would end the show today, and I warn our listeners, if you have a weak constitution, just be prepared. So I was scrolling ESPN.com as I do as I'm preparing for the show, and I saw this headline: Tracy Morgan, food poisoning caused MSG illness. Tracy Morgan, the famous comedian, vomited on the floor. He was sitting courtside at the Heat Knicks game at Madison Square Garden, lost his lunch or his dinner or something
Whatever, he
on the
lost
floor,
something.
causing a 10-minute delay as they had to clean up the court.
Oh.
He has since said that he is doing okay and that food poisoning, as I said, caused the illness. And it got me thinking about the most disgusting things we've seen at sporting events. We've all been to too many sporting events in our lives, right?
By the way, the action shot of Tracy Morgan there it was captured on Twitter. It's
Yeah,
not pretty.
It's not. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
No,
projectile.
Yeah, it was
everywhere.
a full on.
during
What was he eating?
I don't know.
during a Duke game earlier this season, Kaman Maluwach, who is Duke's 7'2" center,
Uh-huh.
I think he got the wind knocked out of him, and he turned around and threw up all over the court. And there was
Oh.
a much longer than 10-minute delay because he's 7'2". So there was probably a lot in that stomach. They had to find every towel at Cameron Indoor Stadium to clean up this mess. That's how bad it was. But Willie, when I mentioned this, you said you have a story that perhaps takes the cake as it comes to
Yes.
the most disgusting thing you've seen in a sporting event.
Well, yeah. So I'm playing for the Medicine Hat Blue Jays in Helena, Montana, against the Helena Brewers. Okay, Blue Jays versus Brewers. Beautiful night in Montana, capital city, big crowd, and I'm playing first base. And up to the plate, they said, now batting for the Helena Brewers. You don't know any of these guys most of the time. They're from all over the place. You know, I'm getting to know my own teammates. This is pretty early in the season. Batting for Helena Brewers, catcher Chris Carter. I was like, hey, I know Chris Carter. Not the wide receiver, Chris Carter, who only catches touchdown passes, the Hall of Famer. This is a guy that I played high school ball against, right? For right down the road, Boone High School. So he happens to get on first base. I was like, hey, Chris, how you doing? Willie. He was like, and he's sweating. He's like, hey, man, I don't feel real well. I was like, Chris, what are you talking about? The next thing you know, it's a ground ball to second base. He gets forced out at second. He slides in. He's out. The return throw to first for the double play, not in time. Man on first, 2 outs. Chris Carter slides into second base and pukes on second base. So you got to know that in the Pioneer League in the summer at Helena, they don't have a grounds crew that's, they don't have a lot of people coming out. So here comes one guy with a shovel and a wheelbarrow at second base.
Some sawdust, perhaps.
Timeout. We got a problem at second base. So Chris was done for the day. He had to leave the game.
Needless to say.
And the wheelbarrow guy had quite the mess to clean up. And I don't think anybody really wanted to slide into second base for the next few innings.
Stand up, devil.
Yeah, stand up whether you need to slide or not. I ain't sliding.
Oh man, I had a situation, and I'm not going to name the player. And this was, for my first couple of years here, and it was more so disgusting than anything I would think. It wasn't like he threw up anywhere, but in a football game, man, sometimes, especially those big fellas, sometimes you're in the trenches, man, and you just in the trenches, and sometimes
Stuff
it's hot
happens.
out there, and you can't just leave the trenches. You can't just I'm just gonna leave the trenches and I'm gonna go. No, sometimes you gotta stay in the trenches, man. And there was one guy on our team, man. Come to find out that, and this is nasty, that he was in the trenches, and instead of saying, "Hey, coach, hey, take me out a couple plays, I gotta use the bathroom," he would just be out there and use the bathroom on himself. Then take some water and spray it all over him. I'm like, man, that is nasty. Like, go on a sideline, do something else, man. You don't have to pee yourself and then water yourself down because somebody is grabbing a hold of your leg and all this stuff. That is just nasty, man.
That is nasty.
Yeah.
Another famous story that I remember. This was not one that I was personally involved in, but it was, I think, but it was a baseball game where there was a player that had a problem. He had, how should we say, the runs a little bit?
Yes.
Not runs like scoring runs in a baseball game, but he had the runs, and he had a problem with his uniform pants when he was playing first base. And so he was leading off the next inning after the third out, but he decided to make the run to go in and change his pants because he had a problem back there. And so he runs back into the clubhouse to change, but he's leading off the inning. It's time to start the game, and he's not back up, right? And so what do you do? So what do you think happened? The manager has to come out and start an argument to delay the game. And the umpire's like, "Where's your batter? Let's go. Hey, I got a guy. He had a problem with his pants. Okay, he had a problem. What do you want me to do?" I can't use the language you said. He bleeped his pants. And they get into a shouting match, and then here comes the batter up to the plate. He's ready to hit, but the manager had to buy a little time for him to get a fresh pair of pants.
Well, I do remember Roberto Luongo, the Hall of Fame goaltender, at the time playing for the Vancouver Canucks. If I recall correctly, it was in the playoffs. He had been sensational through 3 periods. They go to overtime, and the backup goalie is in there, and people are freaking out. Like, what happened to Roberto Luongo? Why is Roberto Luongo not starting overtime? It's because he had to go to the bathroom. Like, during a Stanley Cup playoff game, elimination game, overtime, he didn't start because he was in the bathroom. So I guess crazier things have happened. But tonight, the Predators are back at home against the St. Louis Blues. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6 with Chase McCabe right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The first of 3 games at home this week. Thursday against the Ducks, Saturday against the Maple Leafs, as we talked about at the top of the show, Willie. This is the first of 3 meetings over the next week and a half between the Predators and Blues. These games are always entertaining. The Blues enter this game playing incredibly well. They are right on the cusp of the postseason. So this is the time of the season where the Predators will attempt to play spoiler against one of their division rivals.
The Blues have made a really good run since the 4 Nations face-off. They have won. They won their last game right before, and they're 9-2-2 during that span. And so they've had one of the best records in the league since the 4 Nations break. They're tied right now with the Canucks, and they play the Canucks on Thursday. So this is a big game. There are 3 meetings between the Blues and the Predators in the next 10 days. So it's a good chance to sort of evaluate the progress. You see young players who the Predators desperately need to make a good last impression. You see how they do against teams that are playing meaningful games. It's the next best thing to your team playing meaningful games at this time. You know you can't control that right now. And so I think the ideal scenario between now and the end of the year is you get some progress from guys like Evangelista and Stasny and Svechkov and guys who they really need to make a jump next year. And you win a few games, but you also hope that teams like the Sabres keep winning like they did last night, or the Kraken, so you can stay in that top 5 range for when the first pick in the draft comes back. It gives you a little more ability to win some games if the other teams win games.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
Sad, but that's where you're at.
That's
right?
where you're at right now. That'll do it for us today. Predators and Blues at 7 o'clock, pregame at 6, right after, of course, Stillman and Company, which is coming up next.
Be love on your people. Have a safe, blessed, and wonderful